Okay, it's running. Okay, we're going to be talking about this particular piece, and it's called All Quiet on the Western Front, part 1. And what we're doing here is we're going to go through and analyze it so that using the elements and principles of design, and then if you will take notes so that later on you can write whole sentences about what we're saying here. That's our goal. Okay, so here we go. In this particular piece, there's a great deal of contrast, and in part we can see the contrast. If we were to do this is an invisible line. There's not really a line that's drawn through here, but there is a visual line that essentially kind of divides this into this half and into this half. So if we look at this half, then we see that there is small figures here, a lot of open space, the color blue and white, very light, very airy. And then we look in this half and we see it much darker. We see, less recognizable images. There's a great deal of contrast between those two. We have the light and the dark. We have a great deal of details that we're seeing in this half up here. Everything down to even these tiny little things here. We have cigarettes, we have a cane, we have very clear expressions on their faces. This is in a sharp contrast to what we have down here, which are these organic shapes. We have sharply cut edges, very meticulously cut edges, and then yet we have torn paper here, torn edges here. Okay, textures are a very severe contrast here in that we have smooth tabletop, clear, open areas of the sky. And yet here we have the rough, natural texture of a tree. We have, again, these rougher textures that we see in the torn paper. Let's look for a minute, too, at a contrast between this figure and these figures. This figure is prone. He's actually crawling. These figures are upright. This figure is wearing a sack-like or bag-like garment. And these three fellas here are wearing very pressed, crisp, neat suits. Not at all like this, completely opposite from this. There's contrast in the size. These are smaller, and these are much larger. So we have a nice variety of size. There's also movement, and the movement is created in two main ways. First of all, we do have this diagonal movement that we talked about, that invisible line that shows this figure leading into this figure. Diagonal lines generally indicate movement, and in this case, it's no exception. We have a man who is diagonally moving towards this face. Another way that we see movement across the page is in these strong vertical trees. They're relatively evenly spaced. And by being evenly spaced, they kind of create a natural rhythm. We go boom, 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 boom. And our eye wants to move across that way. In this case, we have another sort of a contrast again, but it's more so rhythm. But we're going to change this up. We go boom, 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 and then all of a sudden, boom, boom. We have these two that would change the rhythm to this one. It's not an even rhythm anymore. It's boom, boom, boom. It's boom, 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 boom. So this kind of creates a different rhythm in the picture than this does right here. We also have a beautiful rhythm that we see here. And this is a very organic type of rhythm, but it's almost reminiscent of the flow of a river. And so we have something that's kind of creating a step up that also creates a movement as well. Rhythm and movement are very tightly connected. Emphasis in here. There's really two main things that are emphasized. One is emphasized by color, and another is emphasized by more so its placement in the drawing. But let's pull it. We should see in this case there is this head here that has a halo that goes around it. Your eye, this is almost in the center, not exactly in the center, but almost in the center. And the color of the red here is what's really bringing your attention. One contrast that we forgot to mention was you have the contrast of the figures all being in black and white with the background being in color. So the best way to call attention to this figure and this face is to highlight it with an intense color such as this red. The red pulls your eye in and calls your attention to his face, which, if we were to zoom in on it, you can see is a look of horror. It's a look of horror. So that sets a mood throughout this piece. You have to wonder what on earth is happening that would create this much fear in a man. We have the proximity of this face to this face. So because of proximity, because they are so close together, this area right here, the whole area, becomes more of a focal point or an emphasis. At first you would say it's this, but you can't see this without seeing this. So this area becomes the focal point. Another focal point is this one, and this one is created because of the color. The color here is in sharp contrast to the darks that we have in the rest of it. So as a result, our eye gets pulled into this. Now, another thing, if you study a little bit about how your eye moves, there's less clutter up here. And our eye gets confused when it looks down into these areas. And so we need a place to rest. Our eyes need a place to rest. So it automatically gets kind of pulled up into here, where it's open and airy. Let's see, another thing that we need to talk about is the unity and how we've created unity in this. Unity is created here. These three men are very definitely unified. They're unified in the fact that they are closely grouped together. They create unity because they are standing side by side and in front of each other, just really close together. That's called proximity. We have proximity between these these three men here. And then we have another unifying factor in that the fact that these men are black and white, and this is black and white, and this is black and white. So the lack of color, as opposed to color, is what unifies these figures. And then this one right here, this is one of the most important aspects of the whole piece. This piece has one spot in the entire piece that connects this half of the image to this half of the image. It's this hand which moves from this part into this space and overlaps his back here, the central figure's back. This is a unifier right here. This is connecting and bringing together these two halves. And it's important to know that it's not just your typical hand. It's obviously a skeletal hand. And so this is an important aspect to this picture. We've probably missed a few things, but we've talked about the most important ones, the ones that seem to jump out first. As with any artwork that you analyze, all of your elements and all of your principles are likely included. It's just that some are included to a lesser degree than others. And so it's not that you want to ignore them. Obviously, we never ignore what's going on in the artwork, but we simply just don't need them for our analysis because we're hitting the high spots. We're hitting those meaty nuggets that we want to talk about specifically because they're important to the whole mood of the piece. So have y'all got any questions at all? Did that help today, seeing it as it was being done? Y'all say that with such enthusiasm. Okay, well hang on and I will be right back.